Is streaming live on YouTube. Okay, well, look, let's start. I'd like to welcome everybody here, the participants in the Zoom meeting and the observers on YouTube. This is a special webinar called Special Autonomy is Dead. Papuans Want to Keep It in the Grave. My name is Jim Elmsley. I'm the moderator for this webinar, and I'm the convener of the West Papua project, which is at the University of Wollongong. This webinar is being put on by the West Papua project in conjunction with the International Academics for West Papua. The West Papua project just briefly started in 2000 at the University of Sydney to encourage research and discussion about West Papua. We've recently moved down to Wollongong University. The International Academics for West Papua is a UK initiative, and it is again encouraging academics to research and debate what is going on in West Papua. Tonight's webinar is being live streamed on YouTube, and after the presentations, we would welcome questions to the panel. What I'm going to do is, first of all, introduce each of our panel members and then very briefly say what they will talk about. And then each participant will talk between 5 and 10 minutes. And then we'll have a brief summary, and then we will go into the Q&A. Our first speaker will be Belinda Lopez, who's an award-winning documentary audio maker, writer, and anthropologist interested in social justice and the stories that people tell about the past, including in West Papua, Indonesia, Spain, and Australia. Hippolytus Wange is a member of the Nduga Solidarity team and a teaching assistant in the School of Politics and International Relations at the Australian National University. He is also undertaking his PhD on West Papua at the ANU. Aprila Waya is a writer and freelance journalist. Her novels are Maua Hitam Tanpa Aka, which is A Black Rose Without Roots in 2009, Dua Perempuan, Two Women, 2013, Sentua Papua, Papua's Touch, 2018, and Tambo Banga Palau in 2020. The documentary film Aprila, which narrates her journalistic life, won a prize at the Tahiti Film Festival in 2019. Cami Webb Gannon is a lecturer with the Faculty of Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities at the University of Wollongong. She's an early career researcher and decolonisation ethnographer focusing on the Pacific Islands region, with a long-term interest in West Papua's independence movement, and more recently in Australian South Sea Islander political identity and decolonisation in Kanaki, New Caledonia. Cami is the coordinator of the West Papua project at the University of Wollongong. She is a recipient of an Australian Research Council linkage grant 2015 to 2020 entitled Music, Mobile Phones and Community Justice in Melanesia. And she is author of a book, Morning Star Rising, The Politics of Decolonisation in West Papua, which is forthcoming from the University of Hawaii Press. And we have Victor Yimo, who is very well known as a spokesman for the KMPB, which I think is Committee National Papua Barak. And he is also the spokesman for the Petisi Rakyat Papua. So in tonight's roll call, we'll start with Aprila Waya, who's going to give us a journalistic view of what is going on at the moment in West Papua, followed by Belinda Lopez, who's going to talk about the Papuan hopes for the first round of OTSUS. And Cami Webb Gannon will talk about why OTSUS failed and options for renewal, revision, or rejection. And Victor Yemo is going to talk about the Petisi Rakyat Papua, how West Papuans are rallying to reject AUKUS II and what people want. And Hippo will talk about why Jakarta wants to renew AUKUS and why special autonomy worked in Aceh, but does not work in Papua. So just before Aprila starts, I'll give a very brief roundup of what a special autonomy was. It was brought in 2001, following the fall of Suharto in 1998 and the independence of East Timor in 1999, when there was large demonstrations and political gatherings in West Papua calling for independence. The Indonesian government, firstly under President Habibie and then most significantly under Abdurrahman Wahid, proposed a special autonomy package, which they hoped would ameliorate the desire for independence. It's coming up to 20 years that policy has been in place. And the debate now is what is going to happen in the future, because something needs to happen next year to renew the funding. So there are essentially three options: to roll it over and continue the status quo, to evaluate its success or otherwise and amend it, or to reject it and call for some sort of dialogue over independence and a referendum. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I'd like to pass the microphone over to Aprila. Thank you, Aprila.
Okay. Thank you, James. First of all, I want to greet everyone now who watched this discussion through YouTube and all friends in webinar, Zoom webinar. First of all, I want to talk about some data from Central Bureau Statistics about why does Papuan people today rejected the second program of special autonomy. The data from Central Bureau Statistics, it's talk about poorest. The number of poor people in Papua and West Papua in 2001, it's around 39%. And the population in 2007 was 716,000, with the number of poor people being 37.26%. So during the 19 years of special autonomy, the number of poor people in Papua increased by 26,360 people. Meanwhile, the average national poverty in 2019 is 9.41%, while Papua is 27.53%, and in West Papua province is at 22.1%. So based on this data, there's no significant difference yet between special autonomy was there for West Papuan people or no. So we can calling back the memory when the history of special autonomy that in 2000 NGOs forum which we always call them like a Fokker LSM in Papua, in Jayapura. They are the they prepare the draft of special autonomy. At that moment, they think that special autonomy will become the bridge between the among Indonesian and Papua, because so many problems at the time after Reformasi 1998. So, but after implemented that law, you can see now that what happened to Papuan people. There are no there's no improve in people life. Like they say that like a military operation area, they already lift the ban, but you see, but till today Papuan people still suffer under the gun of Indonesian soldiers. So But I want to make a note about what the means by failure of special autonomy. We also have to recognize that all implementing regulation, the special autonomy laws in Papua in the form of special region regulation, in Bahasa we call this perdasus, and provincial regulation we call this perdasi, have been made but not implemented till today. Sounds like what you call this Justice and Reconciliation Commission, and so many things like Perdasus number 18 2008 concerning about community based on economic, Perdasus number 19 of 2018 concerning protection and intellectual right of indigenous Papuans. It's already made but not implemented. That's from law perspective. For me, special autonomies fail. Special autonomy not give anything to Papuan, because many places, many job in Papua, West Papua today also taken over by migrant. So many migrant come into Papua after a special autonomy law in Papua. Of course, they come for looking for job, but it's make Papuan people live in marginalized. So for me, special autonomy, it's only about investment, about how the government want to invest more and more in Papua, but they not look at Papua community, native Papuan community today. So um, for many, but what we're talking now, maybe it's also late. Why? Because now today the draft of the second special autonomy now already come into the hand of the government. In Indonesia, we call this as a prolegnas. Prolegnas today is already look at the draft, and they will start to discussion with the government and also with the academics or any part in the government of Jokowi cabinet. So maybe it's not too late, but I don't know. In people in Papua today, they still reject it, especially from a student movement, from a young movement in West Papua, and also all around Java student movement today. Yeah, for me, for us, for Papuan, of course, special autonomy is already dead. But how about Jakarta? Since when Jakarta ever hear Papuan voice? Even since the first time we become a part from Indonesia, they even not think, they even not recognize us as a human being. So for me, special autonomy is very interesting to talking about, because many blood come after this special autonomy. Many Papuans suffer because of special autonomy. I mean, in this context, I'm talking about indigenous Papuan people. So special autonomy not give anything to Papuan, but special autonomy take anything from West Papua, life, our resources, everything from us. That is from me for the beginning. I give it back to James.
Okay, thank you very much, Aprila. That was excellent. I would like to now ask Belinda Lopez to talk about the first round of OTSUS.
Thank you, Jim. It was interesting to reflect back on the making of OTSUS, the first round in 2001, and really before that, and thinking about the context in which it came about. There were discussions about it, in the years prior, and Papuan leaders had expressed a desire for independence. And I think that was a surprise to an Indonesian government who was perhaps for the first time listening to Papuan leaders and meeting with them. So when autonomy khusus, or special autonomy, was proposed, it was really meant to be, I guess, a line under the sand. It was an acknowledgement that things had not been done very well. They had in fact been done badly prior, and that there was a need to address impunity when it came to human rights violations, and to improve the state of education, health, and a number of other measures in Papua. So it's interesting reflecting now on Papuans' approach and their thinking about, 20 years down the track, what they think about Otsus now. If you look back at some of the reports about Otsus and the making of Otsus, there was absolutely, it should be noted, opposition to the idea of it by many Papuans who rejected it as a kind of a placating of Indonesia, and many Papuans did express at the time that they wanted independence. But there was also a really good faith attempt by Papuans, Papuan leaders, community groups, NGOs, church-based groups, a good faith attempt to really engage with the idea of what Otsus would look like, of what would suit the Papuan people, of what they wanted from Otsus, and a very rigorous, methodical attempt to actually, this was Papuan driven, a Papuan driven attempt to gather the opinions of Papuans from around Papua, Papua province, when it was one province. That was kind of spearheaded by the Papuan governor at the time. And I think it's actually interesting to look at a particular study forum that took place at the University of Cendrawasih in March 2001, just before the draft bill was handed over to the Indonesian government. And it was based on months of kind of canvassing opinions from community groups and churches and local officials, adat heads from the different districts, to actually say, well, what do you want? What is important to you? And again, the records show that, at many of these discussions, there was a bit of heated discussion. Some didn't want to engage. Some said we shouldn't compromise. We want independence. But actually, there was a good faith attempt from grassroots all the way up to Papuan leaders to think about, okay, well, what do we want? What do we want to put down in a draft bill? And that culminated in this discussion, this study group that came together for a couple of days in March 2001 to draft a bill that they would later present. And I think there were about 11 rounds of drafting that went through. So a really serious, rigorous, deep felt attempt to say what was needed in Papua, what policy measures were needed, and how could a kind of a meeting halfway happen. And again, it's interesting, I'm sure, as Aprila mentioned, and the other speakers will talk about why it was a failure, and how these kind of expectations were let down. For me, I'd read a lot about Otsus, hearing that the eventual bill was really watered down from what those Papuan leaders presented to the government, that it changed almost entirely. But I'd never actually looked into what that draft was and what some of the points that the Papuans had presented and said, well, this is what we actually want. This is what we would want autonomy khusus or special autonomy to comprise. So I looked it up, and there is some accounts of what Papuans asked for. And I just picked out some of the really interesting ones. And I think we can reflect on these points as we listen to the other speakers and hear what went wrong, because there's a massive abyss between what Papuans' genuine, heartfelt, deeply thought policy points were here and what has eventuated over the last 20 years. So perhaps we can keep that in mind. So some of those points in the draft special autonomy law that were delivered to the President and the Parliament in 2001 by the Governor of Papua Province was for Papua to have its own flag, symbol and anthem, for Papua to have its own police force, which would coordinate with the national police, but would be organized and driven by Papuans themselves, for Indonesian and English to be the language of education, for victims of human rights abuse due to integration with Indonesia to have a right to compensation and rehabilitation, for transmigration to be stopped, for the numbers and placement location of the Indonesian military in Papua to be subject to deliberation by the Papuan Parliament and government, for economic policy to be ecologically sustainable and sensitive to local and customary needs, for Papua to have the right to self-determination if a special historical commission decides that the integration with Indonesia was illegal under international law. I just thought those points were very, very developed and kind of thought out and quite evolved points that were based on compromise and thoughtfulness about a kind of society that Papuans wanted to live in, that was supportive of education, ecology, and that had a healthy relationship that respected human rights and was able to control police and military intervention in Papua. That was what they were asking for. I won't go into what happened instead. I'm sure the other speakers will do that, but it was interesting to reflect on Papuans' really genuine engagement with this process 20 years ago, and considering what happened, it makes it easier to understand why so many groups now, civil society groups, are speaking out against it. That's it from me. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thanks very much, Belinda. That was excellent. It's sort of pointed out the goals and aspirations the Papuans had, which were not reflected in the type of OTSUS that was implemented. So that segues quite nice into Cammie's talk about why OTSUS failed and options for renewal, revision or rejection. Cammie?
Okay, thanks, Jim. So my presentation this evening is titled Special Autonomy is Dead, Yet Jakarta Says Long Live Special Autonomy. And it presents an autopsy of Special Autonomy's corpse. It asks why Special Autonomy died, how it was killed, how we know it is dead, and why Jakarta is trying to resurrect it to create a zombie policy in West Papua. So we've heard from the previous two speakers about West Papuans' reactions to Special Autonomy and why they think it's failed, and about West Papuans' hopes regarding the opportunities that Special Autonomy presented when the initiative was first proposed as an attempt by Jakarta to accommodate at least some of West Papuans' needs after the fall of Suharto. How was it, I ask, that the promise for reform so full of potential evaporated so quickly and so completely? So why did Special Autonomy die? Special Autonomy died because it was born sick and was therefore weak and easy to kill. As Belinda pointed out, many of the conditions that the West Papuan drafting team had hoped to include in the bill, and some of these, as she's mentioned some of these, I mentioned a couple of others, that military deployment by the central government would only be made after deliberation in the Papuan Parliament, that there would be a referendum after 5 years if Special Autonomy failed to meet expectations, that a Papuan Human Rights Commission would be formed. All of these are rejected by Jakarta. So the Special Autonomy Bill was therefore a one-sided document. It reflected Jakarta's distrust of the Papuan elite, that they wouldn't use these increased powers, or that they would use these increased powers to push for secession. And so it was an autonomy granted unilaterally rather than through negotiation, as Jacques Bertrand has stated. And then he says that these processes rarely succeed. Special autonomy was also made vulnerable by the conflict that lay at its foundation. What Papuans have said that they've always wanted out of autonomy is authority over their own lives. And what's clear by the comments that are popping up from viewers on YouTube is that what Jakarta wanted and still wants out of special autonomy under Jokowi is development. So for Jakarta, autonomy means giving the Papuans money to develop their province, but for Papuans, autonomy is about having authority and control over their own lives. Now, the two aren't necessarily incompatible, but Jakarta was only willing to offer was only willing to offer the latter without the former. It was only willing to offer development, but not authority or not self-determination, while Papuans required the former, self-determination, before embarking on the latter kind of economic development. This difference in goals made special autonomy susceptible to failure from the start. Now, what was the cause of death of special autonomy? The cause of death was a blow-by-blow betrayal by Jakarta in its implementation of the law, as Aprila pointed out. Several weeks after the law was passed, the well-known West Papuan independence leader, Tays Eluai, was murdered by Indonesian special forces. And rather than condemn the murder, the then Army Chief of Staff commended the killers and called them heroes. And this did little amongst Papuans to foster confidence in Jakarta's commitment to improving life for Papuans under special autonomy. Then in 2003, before the Majelis Rakyat Papua, or the MRP, or so in English, the Papuan People's Council, before this was brought into existence, and the establishment of the MRP was meant to be a feature of special autonomy, President Megawati announced that she would divide the territory of Papua. She said she divided into 3 provinces. It ended up being divided into 2. This was actually illegal under special autonomy because the law stipulated that territorial division could only take place in Papua with the authority or with the approval of the MRP, which I've just said had not yet been established. So Papuans were betrayed and devastated by this territorial division, which they saw correctly as a tactic of divide and rule. Divide the territory into smaller administrative units, and you've got more people competing for authority, more people scrambling for resources. The government then delayed the establishment of the MRP and then undermined its authority once it was established time and again. Indonesian betrayal of the law killed special autonomy. Jakarta hammered the final nail in the coffin by throwing or flooding the provinces with money that could not be absorbed by the provinces, particularly in the smaller kind of regional units. It was too much money without any plan for how it could be properly and effectively put to use. And this only served to stimulate corruption and co-opt Papuan elites, some of whom have become more, not less, dependent on Jakarta. So we know why it died, we know how it was killed. How do we know it's actually dead? Because Papuans held a funeral for special autonomy 10 years after its implementation to indicate their refusal to be ruled by the Peace of Dead legislation. West Papuans held a funeral for special autonomy. In 2011, more than 1,000, some people say up to 10,000 protesters demonstrated in front of the Regional People's Representative Assembly, and they symbolically handed special autonomy back to Jakarta in a wooden coffin. It was shrouded in black fabric and emblazoned with the words "Special autonomy is dead" in Papua. And leading Papuan intellectuals at the time and theologians issued 11 recommendations rejecting special autonomy and asking for improvements in its place. And they then called for a referendum on independence in West Papua. So let's look at what the options are. It's very unlikely that Jokowi would be willing to make the necessary changes to the law that would make it, or could possibly make it, appealing to West Papuans. These would include delivering real self-determination through offering Papuans the opportunity to form their own political parties, to raise taxes, to build bilateral relations with other countries, to limit migration, not out of kind of a racist opposition to migrants, but in order to protect Papuan cultures. For Papuans to be able to approve all development projects in line with local communities' wishes, as Belinda was saying, within an ecological worldview, and for Papuans to be able to invite international visitors to the region. So why is Jakarta trying to revive a piece of legislation that could only be a zombie? And one answer lies in the current political climate in West Papua, I think. So, commentators have said that you've got 3 issues at the moment. You've got ongoing protests and a real acknowledgement in the air by all Papuans that of the racist treatment for decades by Indonesian government, by the security forces, and by other Indonesian citizens. So you've got this heightened awareness of racism. You've also got increased violence in the highlands. I think Hippo might discuss this, with Papuan guerrilla army becoming, the TPMPB becoming more active, and then Indonesia responding with sending more troops. And what's happened is you have a very disproportionate counterinsurgency that's creating a lot of violence in the highlands. And then you've got COVID-19, which by Papuans is frequently seen as a migrant's disease, because originally the instances of COVID were clustered in migrant populations. Again, the Jakarta government refused to let Papuan provincial governments close the airports to try and prevent the spread of COVID. And so this is added to an all-time high tension in the territory. So, and ostensibly, special autonomy is not about Papuans. We can see it's an effort by Jokowi, I would say, to attempt to breathe new life into the expired law, and a desperate attempt to encourage investors to stay in Papua or to move into Papua during this time of crisis. That's all from me. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thanks very much, Cami. You've explained how special autonomy has been dead for quite a long time. I'd forgotten about the coffin experience. Now we'd like to go to Victor Yimo, who's in the thick of the action as the spokesman for the Petisi Rakyat Papua, and he's going to talk about what's happening now in West Papua. Thank you, Victor. Hang on. Can we hear Victor?
Okay.
Mute your microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, James. Good evening for you. I thank you for West Papua Project and International Academy for West Papua for this beautiful discussion about the special autonomy. First of all, I would like to just before I continue to talk about the expression and the demand of West Papuan through the petition, I would like to bring our discussion again to the main point about the history of West Papua, because for me this is the continuation of all the Indonesian operation in West Papua. So today, West Papuan people in entire West Papua and outside and inside, we agree that the special autonomy is not a favor of Indonesian government in West Papua, but this is the continuation of the effort by the Indonesia to kill the right of self-determination from the beginning. They kill our right of self-determination from the occupation in 1961. They kill our right of self-determination through the economic and political conspiracy in 1967, when Freeport took place in West Papua. They also kill our right of self-determination through the Act of No Choice in 1969. And coming to 2001, they also kill our right of self-determination through the granted of the special autonomy. So this is the long history of operation by under the Indonesian occupation in West Papua. So this generation in West Papua, we know and we are like that. We already learned from our political history, and we also experience and learn from our reality today about what is the Indonesia in West Papua. So in this generation, not only our generation, but for our elders until today, we learn a lot about international law research, and also we know from today's many research shows that Indonesia is a very massively not only occupied, but in the practice of colonialism, in practice of operation in West Papua is still going on until today. So all the people of West Papua from various organizations, not only from the movement, but from all civil society in West Papua, today they know by themselves in everyday life. Also, not only from everyday life, but from the data that genocide is still going on in West Papua. All the studies and the analysis has proof it that the genocide is going on in West Papua. Around 2.5 million in West Papua today, and our neighbor of PNG is already about 8.3 million. And the central statistic of Indonesia annually receives the two provinces in West Papua and in West Papua, Papua Barat and Papua, are the lowest human development index in Indonesia. And you know that Timika, Tembagapura, where the Freeport exists now, is the poorest district in Indonesia, according to the Indonesian statistic. Not only that, we know that the exploitation and ecocide is still going on. And you see the Pusaka Foundation found 240 mining campaign says around 9.1 million hectares in West Papua. And you see also the Forest Watch in Indonesia find deforestation in West Papua is around 169 hectares, 100,000 hectares every year in West Papua. 83 logging companies that control 13 million hectares of forest in West Papua. So not only that, but to close all the information from West Papua, you know, Indonesia also paid $300,000 paid by Indonesian government to the fake account to make a black propaganda. You see that in April this year, 295 fake account of Twitter deleted by the Twitter in this April, and 80 account, the fake account or black propaganda account of Facebook deleted by Facebook in this March. Not only about the propaganda media used by Indonesia to close all information in West Papua, but you see the reality. We want to talk about the special autonomy, to talk about the affirmative action in West Papua. In the last election shows that Indonesian local parliament in West Papua dominated by the migrant. So this shows there's all the evidence of West Papuan today showing that West Papuan people there is no future under the Indonesian control in West Papua. So to extend the special autonomy in West Papua is the agenda of the political and economic benefit or advantage by Indonesia in West Papua. So I think in the end of the special autonomy in 2021, West Papuan people under the all organization, as of today, there are 38 organizations came together to join in one movement, civil movement, because in West Papua today, you can see by yourself through all the information that Jakarta trying to use our aspiration as a political object to compromise with the local elite in West Papua and Indonesia. It seems like similar like in 2001 when West Papuan people peacefully demand the right of self-determination in Indonesia offered and granted through the self-compromise by local West Papuan and Indonesia to continue the special autonomy in West Papua. So our petition came together, which West Papuan people expression of unity and position toward the special autonomy status granted by Indonesia. So in this petition, we express our rejection of the plan to extend the special autonomy, the second phase of special autonomy in West Papua. We firmly believe that upholding the right of people of West Papua to determine their own destiny in the just and a democratic way to address the long-standing issue of Indonesia occupation of West Papua. So in this petition, we demand, we strongly reject the special autonomy. We demand the government to stop taking advantage of the Papuan people to gain their political and economic advantage for a handful of Indonesian ruling elite at the cost of the suffering of the Papuan people. The third one, we refuse all the forms of unilateral discussion and decision making that we call for an immediate to stop all the manipulative scheme of the government of Indonesia together with various groups and so-called West Papuan representatives to seek or to reduce the fundamental problems of the people of West Papua into the discussion of the special autonomy funds. So in this statement, we also demand to stop Indonesian colonialism, capitalism, and politics of militarization throughout West Papua, which is embedded in the special autonomy policy. We immediately uphold the West Papuan people's right to choose and determine their own destiny, whether they accept the special autonomy or they decide to independence as a country. We also support through this petition that we already distribute entire West Papua outside West Papua, that we support the vote of 1.8 million Papuans, people who signed the petition in 2017, asking for the international supervision for self-determination through a referendum in West Papua. So at the last demand, we stated that through this organization, if this petition not respond by the Indonesian government, and they will, if they continue compromise and they continue to extend this special autonomy, we already commit with our people in West Papua, with all the GSOs who now consolidate in West Papua, outside, inside, within West Papuan people, that we will carry out national civil disobedience throughout West Papua, peaceful and democratic manners. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Victor. That was wonderful. Very clear statement there of what you are after and what the petition means. Now, our last speaker is Hippo Wangai, who's going to talk about why Jakarta wants to renew Otsus and why special autonomy worked in Aceh but does not work in Papua. And we're lucky to have Hippo here as well as the other speakers, because Hippo's in the last year or so has spent quite a bit of time up in Nuga and has seen firsthand the consequences of the government's militarization of the highlands. So Hippo, please let us know your thoughts.
Okay, Jim, and thank you for the West Papuan Project and the International Academy for West Papua for hosting this very important webinar about Otsus, which is much discussed issue in West Papua. My short talk is based on 2 fieldwork papers, co-authoring with some friends, including Kemi. One of my papers is about the special autonomy, contrasting Aceh and Papua. And another paper is the failure of counterinsurgency operation in Duga, West Papua. So these 2 papers, again, are based on my fieldwork and some visits back in 2016, and it was in last year, 2019. So the key questions in my paper about the spatial autonomy is that while the autonomy relatively works in addressing ethno self-determination conflict in Aceh, but fails in West Papua. But also it is important to address the question about why does the central government still want to renew or continue the Otsus in West Papua. In fact, the Indonesian Parliament, National Parliament, has included deliberation of Otsus bill in this year's national legislation program called Prolegnas. But that's also interesting because on the one hand, the public discourse in Jakarta is merely about the end of Otsus funds. The fund itself is valid up to 20 years since the first implementation of Otsus in January 2002, which means it will terminate next year, 2021. But also on the other hand, the bill which is subject of this year Prolegnas is not only about the fund. The bill itself was first introduced in 2014, called the Otsus Plus Bill. It was drafted and proposed by the Papuan elites, such as Lucas Nmb and then Abraham Mataruri, 2 governors. One of them is still in power. But it didn't go through the legislation process back in 2014. But the bill itself was still in Jakarta. Another bill was proposed again in 2014, and then it is so-called the Law of Government of Papua, and it was accepted by the central government, the Ministry of Law and Human Rights, and also the National Parliament in January 2020. And surprisingly, it went through the National Legislation Program, Prolegnas 2020. So this time, the Otsus Fund is not only the issue in the bill, as it also covers broad issues from politics, history, to international relation issue. It means that the National Parliament will not only discuss the continuation of the Otsus Fund, but also other aspects of spatial autonomy. So the question is why that Jakarta still wants to this kind of spatial autonomy framework as the only political arrangement or answer to deal with the long-running ethno-nationalist conflict in West Papua. So I'm drawing from the perspective, a simple perspective of structural and agency perspective. First of all, there is no significant political and economic crisis in Indonesia, which can strongly prompt the central government to change or adopt a different political arrangement to deal with the conflict in West Papua, as occurred in the early 2000s. Yes, Indonesian democracy has been declining in terms of its values and principle, authoritarian tendency from the elected leaders, populist polarization, and the weakening of anti-corruption efforts among civil society. And of course, these factors alone do not push much forward to destabilize the country, as happened back in the late 1990s. And also, another crucial factor is that there is a limited international pressure from international community to deal with the West Papuan issue, the pressuring the Indonesian government to terminate the conflict. Yes, there is a strong voice from the Pacific countries since the early 2000s, particularly after the West Papuan issue was for the first time ever institutionalized in the Melanesian Spearhead Group, MSG, and it has been followed by criticisms from other regional organizations such as the Pacific Islands Forum, Yet the Western countries in general and influential international organizations such as United Nations have not strongly pushed the Indonesian government to address the conflict in West Papua. For example, although the UN Human Rights Committee has frequently asked a visit to West Papua, particularly after the racism-driven protests last year, the Indonesian government promised nothing to respond to such initiative. Take a look on the list of governments or countries rejecting for the United Human Rights Committee reformation to expand its role for tackling human rights cases. Indonesia is one of them, one of the countries that reject any proposal to reform United Nations Human Rights Committee to do, kind of advanced reform to deal with human rights in many countries. Another thing is that the UN and also other Western countries, although they are champions of democracy and human rights, but they haven't done anything to push for progressive efforts to the countries like Indonesia that has a serious problem of promoting and protecting human rights in a conflict area, particularly in West Papua. That's for structural, general perspective of why Indonesian government doesn't want to adopt a different approach or arrangement to deal with the West Papuan issue unless this kind of the float special autonomy. But also we can take a look about the agencies, the central government itself. The central government only framed the Otsus as an economic issue. Other speakers have highlighted this pretty much about it's a narrow perspective of how you deal with the special autonomy. Yes, the central government identifies problems of human rights, environment, and culture, but the dominant narrative is still about economic related issues such as development, infrastructure, welfare policy. Such perspective is also widely shared by Indonesian institutions or scholars, to name a few: the Papuan Center of the University of Indonesia, and then Papuan Task Force of the Universitas Gadjah Mada, UGM, two biggest universities in Indonesia. The economy perspective of Otsus can also be reflected by the presence of the special government unit, UP4B, back during this in 2011, when the Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono was still in power. And also there is some sort of kind of coordinated mechanisms under President Joko Widodo in this administration under Jokowi's and his team. Papuan issues have been coordinated by the Presidential Staff Office, KSP, Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas, and Indonesian Audit Board, BPK. Three agencies that focus on Otsus funds and development. In terms of approaches, we can also take a look, for instance, from the presentation of the KSP staff. It was like a couple of weeks ago. She said that under Jokowi's administration, they have adopted three elements: cultural approach, welfare approach, and evaluative approaches, all of which focus on delivering government programs to Papuans. Moreover, relevant presidential regulation or instructions in Jokowi era mostly support the economic perspective of Otsus. We can take a look also about some sort of regulations of the central government. It was a presidential instruction number 9, 2017 on accelerating development and welfare in Papua, which ends this year. But also the central government is preparing another development-oriented regulation. Ironically, there has been no government or presidential regulation that recognize West Papuan identity or interests, such as the establishment of Human Rights Court, the Papuan Truth and Reconciliation Commission, local political parties, a dialogue, or even a security management in West Papua. So what makes it more ironic is such developmental approaches and regulation have been implemented with the security approach. So it goes alongside with this kind of the well-known security approach. Now, another agency that we have to take a look why Jakarta is so confident to renew the Otsus is that the security force, military and police, it is still one of the most important actors to deal with the Papuan issues. There is no urgent factor to reform its approach in a conflict area of West Papua. Even Jokowi's administration has given a green light for the military and police to expand its role and position. A recently published paper by Jun Hona, he brilliantly highlights how the military under Jokowi and also the police gets its own benefits, because Jokowi, to some points, is investing a lot in building relations with the security force. All crucial ministries and agencies dealing with Papuan issues, including OTSUS, are led by former security figures that share conservative or nationalist perspective of Indonesian national unity. For instance, take a look, the Ministry of Home Affairs, led by a 4-star police general, Tito Karnavian, a former police officer, lead the Papuan police office in West Papua. And also another crucial figure, you can take a look in the presidential staff office, led by a former military commander, defense minister headed by a former special force commander, Prabowo Subianto, the coordinating ministry for maritime affairs and investment, and also president's right-hand man, former General Luhut Panjaitan. It is also the crucial figures under this administration to deal with security issues and economic issues in West Papua. And of course, during this pandemic era, the military and police have relatively been successful to advance their agenda, particularly in Papua. Take a look, one example, the creation of the Joint Regional Defense Commands, Kogat Wilhan, in 2019 throughout the country. The example is that 3 weeks ago in Duga, a father and son got killed by the soldiers under the auspices of this Kogat Wilhan. So this kind of a newly formed agency, newly formed command within the TNI structure or the military structure is quite powerful to be deployed in a conflict area like in West Papua. So that's particularly kind of the crucial perspective to understand why Jakarta still wants to renew this special autonomy law. And it goes down to another question. The last question is about why it has been a failed case to address ethno-nationalist conflict in West Papua. I'm just amplifying what Victor, Aprila, and others have spoken about why it has failed. It has been a failure case in West Papua comparing to Aceh. Our key argument in the paper is that why it has been a failure case for West Papua, because from the beginning, the process was flawed. It is only a narrow negotiation. Some scholars even say that the process, actually, it was about the political concession, not political negotiation, because it excluded pro-independence figures, Papuan nationalist figures at the time. The central government only approved the voices of those Papuans who can collaborate with the central government. But in the case of Aceh, from the process of drafting of the so-called law on governing Aceh in 2006, it includes the rebel groups, the GAMP, Aceh's Liberation Organization. From the very outset, they were included in the process. So that law gives some sort of legitimacy to deal with ethno-nationalist problem in Aceh, but that's not the case in West Papua. And the second thing is that it's not only about, it's not so much about the content. The content between a spatial autonomy in Aceh and Papua was pretty much the same one. But the question is for us, especially based on our paper, is that which group can get some sort of benefits from the content of OTSUS. In the case of Aceh, it's pretty much the elites. That's also the case for West Papua. They were the one drafting, mostly dominated the drafting process of OTSUS in 2001, but also they got the benefits of this Otsus, and they left many indigenous Papuans suffer, marginalized, discriminated since the very beginning. And the problem also, some of the speakers have highlighted, is that about the Otsus itself only reflect Jakarta's centralized perspective to deal with ethno-nationalist problem in West Papua. They keep interfering, they keep putting their hand in daily issues of West Papua. Take for example of cultural or nationalist symbols, the flag, political parties, identity of West Papua have been suppressed, have been marginalized, have been overlooked by the central government for years. And also in terms of how Aceh got some sort of a stronger voice in dealing with their own affairs, it's because the GAM itself, once they got their power, they can participate in elections, they can form their own political parties, they can express their cultural identity, even the flag. So it gives some strong of a sentiment, a strong sentiment of becoming Acehnese. But for Papua, Otsus only reminds Papua that they are a minority in their own land.
Right.
Two different cases. So I think I will stop there for the kind of highlight of the case why Otsus or autonomy in Aceh relatively works, but it fails to address ethno-nationalist sentiment in West Papua. I'm handing back to Jim. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Hippo. That was very interesting. You sort of explained why the Otsus has worked for many people, in particular the Indonesian government, and why they don't want to change it with its focus on economic elements, and also why special autonomy did work in Aceh and it hasn't in West Papua. So what I'm going to do now is very briefly summarize your talks, and please jump in if I've got it wrong. But Aprila eloquently expressed that from the average person's, Papuan person's experience, that special autonomy has been a failure. The people's lives haven't improved at all. They haven't got jobs. There are more migrants. There's still violence. And so it's been, it's never delivered anything for the people. Belinda talked about the process that was undertaken by the Papuans when they drafted their own version of what they would like special autonomy to be, which included many aspects that if they'd have been engaged, the province might, or the country might be a very, very different place now if they'd been given real local power over their lives and over military operations and forests. But that process was gutted, and the special autonomy that was imposed upon them came directly from Jakarta, and it served Jakarta's interests, which is why Cami went to some detail of explaining why it was dead. And it was dead 10 years ago from the Papuans' point of view, that it hadn't delivered anything for them, and that to very right at the beginning of it, to split West Papua into two provinces was a sign of the contempt of the incoming government of Megawati Sukarnoputri had for the whole process of her predecessor, Gastur, who was genuinely trying to find some common ground with the Papuan people. And then it led to his political demise, really, his concessions to the Papuans. And then Victor made it very clear that that the Otsus was seen as a continuation of the denial of the rights of self-determination of the West Papuan people that had been going on ever since 1962-63, when the Indonesians took over the country. And that all of the processes that had gone on have involved stripping the Papuans of their rights, and later the logging and the mining, the destruction of the country for the benefit of a small group of very wealthy people, and that he is rejecting the Otsus renewal completely. And he's as part of the Petisis Rakyat Papua. There's now 38 organisations which span church groups and many other groups, and including the international groups and the UMWP, who are rejecting it, and further saying that if they're ignored by Jakarta, they will embark on a campaign of national civil disobedience. And then Hippo, as I mentioned, has really said, he explained in some detail of the way the Indonesian government has actually controlled the process, and that it's been very much set up for the benefit of the Indonesians, and that they've been able to do this because they've been much more powerful and they've been able to impose this down. In a way, I think one aspect of the Achinese conflict is that the military capacity of GAM was considerably more than the OPM, and the pressure on the Indonesian government, I think after many decades of conflict, was an element. But Hippo made the crucial distinction that in the Achinese talks, the rebel groups were involved from the outset, when in the Optus talks with the West Papuans, they weren't, because the Indonesian government was in much greater power. So I think we can say that there's this huge gulf between what the Indonesian government sees there, which is a resolution of the problems through economic benefits and development, while Victor and many other Papuans and Aprila are rejecting it because the experience of the 20 years is really a lost opportunity from Indonesia, and it will become increasingly difficult to find some middle ground there. But I'd certainly would welcome questions from anyone. I'm not sure how I'm going to get them. I think, Ronnie, how are you available? How do we get questions?
And James,
Yo.
sorry. James, can I respond from Hippo?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to talk about a response. I want to respond Hippo talking about the MOU between GAM and MOU Helsinki between GAM and that Indonesian government. That doesn't mean it's not happening in Papua, because in West Papua it's also happened. They try it, but it's failed. I found it when I'm do research for my third novels into Papua. I'm talk about how OPM become a two-part in Papuan history. And I found out that in 11 of October 2011, on 11 o'clock, Farid Hussein, who's the person, president staff, a special staff from Indonesia, also do the same MOU with OPM inside Tanah Merah with the Richard Yoweni group at the time. But it's failed. I think it's not the work, and it's not. There's also not covered by a lot of media at that moment, because I think if you talk about if you're talking about relation about especially Papua with the other part from Indonesia, like Timor-Leste, it's very hard for Papua to become to become independent. Why? Because there are UN resolution for West Papua when Papua become integrated with Indonesia. But it's not happened when East Timor become a part from Indonesia. That's not UN resolution. That's why it's not that hard for from international law for East Timor to get independent. And also for Aceh, of course, it's not easy for Aceh, like seems like Papua, West Papua today, forget their independence, because Aceh already become a part from Indonesia from the first. And in Papua become a part from Indonesia. Of course, Papuan people today will say that it's something's wrong with the history. There's a fake history. Many people will complain about the history, how Papuan become a part from Indonesia today. But still, Indonesia also always have a reason that they say we have a UN resolution 2504 for legalize that Papuan are legal in, Indonesia are legal in Papua today. But before that, they also resolution 448 about decolonization, and Papua also apart from that, from the list of the decolonization area. But it's never do, I don't know, but international lawyers for West Papua maybe have to look at this, because this is the change for West Papua to zoom back UN, because this is UN fault for me. If today Papuan people say to people they say that we are in UN now, Papua problem in UN, I say why you have to be proud when you talk in UN, when you are talking in UN. Why? Because UN, it's Papua become part of Indonesia. It's a conspiration between UN, US, Indonesia, and the Netherlands. And why we have to be proud? That's it. And because many people maybe also not know about the 11-11-11 memory of understanding between OPM and Indonesia. So for me, if I'm put myself in Indonesian side as a president, Susilo Bambang, you don't know, at least do something for West Papua to make to solve the conflict little bit, but not for the other president. I mean, like Jokowi now today, I even not see the goodwilling from the government to take, of course, like I'm agree with Hippo when he talk about why Indonesia government just take the people with the same people who work with them to make a dialogue or something like that. Of course, they have to ask people who disagree with Indonesian program in West Papua today. And also about racism, last year it's not happened just like that. I have my own opinion that because of Freeport, Indonesia buy 50% from Freeport, and then Indonesia also have a debt, and how they can pay the debt, they have to sell something, right? So they put also Papua land again for investment, and then how they can put investment without security. They need security for safe their investing. So they need reason to drop more troops in West Papua. So racism is not happen just like that in that moment. So they need a problem. They need people to make fire in Papua. So they have a reason to drop more troops to Papua. And it's also about I'm agree with Kemi about education field. Everything's field in West Papua today, but in based on study, everything was filled, and we cannot say that a special autonomy is also good for West Papua today. But what the next? My question is, what next? If you rejected the special autonomy today, and then what next? Okay, I hand back to James.
Okay, well, it said somebody who'd like to answer that. Perhaps I can ask Victor to outline what his vision is. Is Victor there?
Okay, well, yes. Okay, James, I thank you very much for everyone for sharing all the information, opinion. Your argument is very powerful for the people of West Papua. First of all, I would like to say again that the people of West Papua still continue for their right of self-determination until today. So for us today, peaceful resolution is something that we West Papua need, not only from all the civil society in West Papua, all the various groups in West Papua, but from the political movement in West Papua. We, under the United Liberation Movement for West Papua, we already open for the peace solution in West Papua. I think we want all the part of the conflict in West Papua to decide peaceful resolution in West Papua. So too many times we want Indonesia to open talks with West Papuan people, with West Papuan political struggle movement in West Papua. Before we have many groups in West Papua, but today we have our armored, our liberation defense, our liberation movement in West Papua, under the United Liberation Movement in West Papua. And we have our vision that we want democratic and peace resolution in West Papua. We want the final solution in West Papua, because all the Indonesian policy in West Papua doesn't make any progress for the people of West Papua. Today we commit that Indonesia is not our future in West Papua. We commit that not only for before, yes, only the guerrillas in the jungle, only the diplomat in outside, in exile, to talk about this political demand. But today West Papuan people all around West Papua in Indonesia talk about this demand. People of West Papua, they want a peace solution. The church leader already talked about the peace solution. The customary
Victor. Oh. We might have lost Victor. Victor, can you hear me? Look, we might come back a bit.
Jim, there's some questions on the side, if you can see.
They don't seem to be questions, more like comments, unless I'm missing something.
So there's just one question here I can see. Why has no one addressed mismanagement and misappropriation of funds within the Papuan elite?
I think Aprila said something about that in a comment earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I can see that now.
Maybe
Well, who would like to answer that? Perhaps we could ask Aprila. Aprila, are you available? Unmute.
Can you address that one?
Jim Hippo said he can address that one.
Okay, Hippo, that would be good. I'm not sure if Aprila's hearing us, but please do, Hippo.
That's also a crucial problem in West Papua, because for years since the first implementation of OTSUS in 1st January 2002, again, it was all about the transfer payments from the central government to the local governments. And when they give the money, the crucial problem or the missing link is about the authority and the capability of the local governments to deal with the funds. So for the Jakarta perspective, to some points, what I understand is that they only give them the money because that's what they also do in Aceh. Once Aceh got its first government in 2006, it was not followed by a certain guidance of the central government of how you deal with the massive fund from the central government, but they only give certain, paperwork guidelines to the central government, and you have to follow certain items from A to Z. And by doing so, they have to manage and distribute the money not only at the provincial level, but it all go down. The distribution of money goes down to the district levels. And also the problem of the money itself meets management problem, also about the human development capacity of those people in not only in coastal but also in highlands. The central government they keep saying that it's all about the local governments dealing with the money. It's not us. We just only to supervise. We just only provide some paperwork guidelines, but the execution, how you deal with the money, how you distribute the money, it's based on your own interest, based on your own perspective in West Papua. So for me, it's kind of they keep blaming the local governments for mismanagement, but it turns out the central government also plays a role not to supervise, not to have their proper training, not to have their proper guidance for the local governments. I think that's all from me. Maybe Aprila or other speakers. Victor is coming back, so maybe he wants to say something about the problem of mismanagement in Papua.
Victor, I'm not sure if you heard that, but there was a question from somebody on YouTube. Why has no one addressed the mismanagement and misappropriation of funds within the Papuan elite?
Yeah, thank you. I think we cannot build Papua with money. That's the answer. Money cannot build, or money cannot guarantee the life of the people of West Papua. From the first, when the UNDP fund Indonesia for 25 million, 30,000 millions in 1963, when Indonesia, when the United Nations hand over the administration of West Papua to Indonesia to fulfill the right of self-determination, Indonesia failed to build West Papua. So this is the second phase of the special autonomy in West Papua. Money deported to West Papua, funded by any positive motivation to build the West Papuan people. So if you're talking about the money in West Papua, the Indonesian government only distribute 92 billions in West Papua, but Indonesia from West Papua, from Freeport McMoran, we contribute, or they contribute 200 billion to Indonesia. So we give more than Indonesia gives to West Papua, if you want to talk about money. As I said that Mimika, the district of Mimika is close with the Freeport McMoran, but this district is the poorest in Indonesia today. It shows that it means that money cannot buy or money cannot guarantee the life of the people of West Papua. So whatever, how big money fund by Indonesia or distributed by Indonesia to West Papua, it will not guarantee the people of West Papua, because there is a psychologically, there is a need by themselves inside their heart. How can you give money, then another one you oppress people, you kill them, you kill them in West Papua. But not only do not talk about the money, but in front of the capital in Jayapura, you can find the market of Mama Papua, never built by Indonesia until today. But it's only 2 years, the last 2 years only, Indonesia give the places. But these places is only dominated by the Indonesian migrant too. So where is the affirmative action in West Papua? You can give money, but without any element of the power. There is no power. So the elite of Papua is powerless. So
great. Well, thank you, Victor. That's a great example, because the next question was where does the money for Optus come from? And you've pointed out that the Timika Regency is the poorest in Indonesia, but the Freeport copper mine is the biggest economic entity in Indonesia, and it's the biggest taxpayer in Indonesia. And yet those people who live around it, as you pointed out, are the poorest in the country. So it's sort of symbolic of the complete break in revenue and return. So the Optus money, which since in the last 20 years it's been in excess of $7 billion, in effect it has not improved the lives of the Papuans at all, and it has been either wasted or stolen or misused. But I think we're drawing to the end of our discussion. So what I'd like to do is just ask you very briefly to make a final comment. And if we start with Aprila and we run through the order, and then we'll wrap the seminar up. It's been very interesting. So Aprila, if you could just make a concluding statement, if you're on. Are you there, Aprila?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, thanks, James. I want to continue about the misleading of the Papuan leaders, mismanagement, because Papuan leaders today also do the same things what really happened to Indonesia in the past. They cooperate with the colonialism. They do many things. I mean, like what happened today about Papuan people underground rejected for the special autonomy, but the Papuan elite today also cooperate with the Jakarta to make the draft of special autonomy law, the second one. So this is how about Papuan elite do to Papua. They always hiding some things. I mean, like when Papuan people, there are like a momentum that Papuans say, we want to get freedom. Like in 1999, 100 teams from West Papua come and visit Habibie, and they ask for freedom from Indonesia. And at that moment, all the Papuan elite also take a part from them. But in other side, they also make many deal with Jakarta to also send more troops to West Papua, because they also have the same habit with Jakarta to get position, to get some things from Indonesia. I think it's happened in many revolutions in many countries. So like in Indonesia, why Indonesia get oppressed for 350 years? Because at that moment also the leaders of the kingdom in Java also cooperate with the Netherlands, with the Dutch, who colonized them. And it's also happened today in Papua. If people say, but today, Indonesia always say, but today Papua leaders, West Papua leaders are Papuan. They are native Papuan who lead Papua today. Yeah, but they are corrupt person. They are corrupt leader. They have no option. But they sometimes they just pretend like they care about the people. But in the other hand, they also have sakak of the Jakarta. So wow, it's really something. I'm sorry for my word, but
Yeah, no, that's
I
all
think
right.
yeah, in other and in the same times they also they also become a partner from Jakarta. This make people in Papua become confused who they will follow. I mean, yeah, in other side, they Papuan also live in confused. They what we gonna do? What will happen next? What we gonna hold from our leader? That's many problem inside Papua. We only not only talk about Papua because we can see many Papuan today also confused for their life. They have no nothing for do. I mean, like there's no any other option for job. They only want to become pegawai negeri sipil. Government servant, and then yeah, they have no nothing if they not become a government servant, and then they will not do anything. So Papuan would get pushed to the corner, and they have no option in their life. That's why if today they say special autonomy was successful in West Papua, it's also a question for me, because all the job, all the work in Papua today take over by the migrant. So it's also I also want to make a comparison between Bali and Papua. Bali have no special autonomy or special something like Yogyakarta, also a special region of Yogyakarta, but Bali have nothing there. But indigenous Bali can drive motorcycle without helm. They just want to show that I'm the native here. I can drive motor without helm. But in Papua, which one is special? Except the money, like Hippo and Victor said before, that it's only money. Of special autonomy, it's only about money for West Papuan today. That's what I want to say.
Okay, well, thank you, Aprila. The struggle will continue. And Belinda, if I could ask you to make some final comments. Belinda?
It looks like she's not there.
We might have lost Belinda. Okay. In that case, Cami, if you can make a concluding comment or two.
Just quickly, two comments. One is that I just saw I'll build on what Victor said, and and I'm quoting Victor, he said, "You cannot build Papua with money," and that was in response to the question, "Why is no one talking about the corruption of Papuan elites?" Well, I think that's what this whole thing is about. Papuan civil society is rejecting special autonomy because the money is corrupting their elites. It's not about money. It's about structures of accountability. It's about self-determination. It's about power. It's not about saying Jakarta's chucking money at our leaders who are then, co-opting them and corrupting them. That's not what we want. There's a huge problem with this. Our leaders, select elite leaders are using up all the money. Jakarta's benefiting from that. Hence, you can see that special autonomy has failed. My second comment was that in response to another question that said, why has no one invited an Indonesian side to this seminar? Everyone is biased here and siding with Papua. Well, the reason we're having this seminar is because Indonesia's voice is always heard. Indonesia's voice is the dominant voice. West Papuans' voices are marginalized. And so this webinar is an attempt to give West Papuans a voice, to let their side be heard. And those of us who aren't Papuan on here are just attempting to amplify or use our kind of platform as being non-Papuans to support Papuans' voices.
Okay, thank you, Cami. That was terrific. And Victor, if you could give some closing comments, please.
Yes, Jim. I think my last comment is we today West Papuan will continue for the right of to continue fight for the right of self-determination. we believe in people in West Papua. So people consolidate by themselves in West Papua. We believe to the power of the people of West Papua. We know that the Indonesian hegemony in West Papua through all the programs in West Papua will continue to influence the people of West Papua. But we believe and we identify from our history of operation in West Papua. West Papua already see by themselves that they are under operation. And for their future, they already know that there is no any chance or there is no opportunity, there is no any guarantee under Indonesian control. So what we need today from people outside is solidarity from peoples to peoples. We have solidarity from East Timor, from Timor-Leste, Mauberes People's Front, and from Indonesia, Indonesian peoples from West Papua. And not only from them, because we want not only West Papuan people, we want all the Indonesian people in West Papua to know, to agree, and to decide together with the people of West Papua to decide the future, decide for the West Papuan futures. So for me, from this petition, as of today, there are 338 organizations. So we are still calling for the international solidarity. Please put your organization, support the people of West Papua, pressure the Jakarta to open political willing to the peaceful resolution with the West Papuan leader through the ULMWP. That's what we want from West Papua today.
Great. Thank you, Victor. That was a clear and unequivocal comment. And Belinda, you're back with us, so perhaps you would just like to make a winding up comment.
Well, I hope I'm not repeating any of the other speakers, but I would just say that if you do look back at the history of autonomy courses, so as we've discussed tonight, it's just another example of where pledges were made to end impunity in Papua and human rights abuses and to truly address these problems. And clearly that has not eventuated, as we've discussed tonight. I think what happened last year with the Papua uprising changed the way that Papua is spoken about in Indonesia more widely. In Java, there's a far greater awareness amongst Indonesians as well about Papuan grievances than I believe I noticed earlier. So it'll be interesting to see how the government responds. This isn't something that they can ignore and hide away anymore. I think there's a level of an accountability now, not just in the international community, but domestically, that it'll be interesting to see what hand the government plays in response.
That's great. That's a very interesting comment, that it is no longer a struggle lost in the depths of the jungle, that even the communication we're using tonight is bringing the whole conflict out into the open in a way that's never really been before. And Hippo, you've got the honour of the last concluding comment.
Thank you. I really give my respect to all the speakers, all the viewers here in the webinar and also on YouTube. My final comment is pretty simple. So we will see, we hope that the kind of protests led by the grassroots movement, KNPB, IMP, Sonamapa, and etc., can give something to Jakarta, to central government, to reconsider another policy or another kind of alternative to deal with the ethno self-determination conflict in West Papua. We hope that there is no any other protests like we had before in 2005, 2010, also led by the grassroots movement, but it didn't give any strong pressure to the government to do something to deal with the complexity of problems in West Papua. But if the central government keeps doing the same thing, they keep continuing the so-called Otsus plus, whatever plus means for the central government. But if they still do this kind of thing, they will face another protest, a big protest, probably a potential protest from the grassroots in West Papua. If I may take a comparative cases in Quebec or other successful cases in dealing with majority-minority relations, I will say that it has been proven scientifically that the autonomy, like other aspect of majority-minority relation, must be seen as an ongoing dialogue, managing minority demands. If you still want to do that, this kind of autonomy, please consider what's going on from the West Papuan or indigenous Papuans. That's the only thing that Jakarta can hear, Jakarta can respond, because autonomy is not the end or the outcome to deal with the ethno-nationalist conflict, but it's only a mechanisms to respond to the indigenous West Papuan demands. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Hippo, and thank you, the whole panel, April Waya, Belinda Lopez, Cami Webb Gannon, Victor Yimo, and again, Hippo Wangi. It's been a very interesting evening, and I've certainly learned something. And so thank you. Thanks to everybody, and we will sign off now.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, James.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.